Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So today I'm looking at an article called Spinster is in its infancy, but it's already making waves in the Fediverse. Now, just in case you don't have a clue what the Fediverse is, to put it in really simplistic terms, the Fediverse is a social media alternative platform which is decentralized, unlike things like Twitter and Facebook, which are centralized and run by one organization or one company. The Fediverse is more diverse and hosted on numerous different sites and interconnected. The article goes into it in a bit more detail, so in case that simplistic overview was confusing or something, you'll pick it up. And in case that's not enough, I've linked a video below which goes into it in a lot more detail. But for the sake of this article, just think of things like Gab. Alright, Gab is a perfect example of an alternative to Twitter which is hosted in the Fediverse. It says here, from left to right, the male-dominated Fediverse is working to silence the thousands of women flocking to Spinster, a new woman-centered social media platform. Well, you know, that's what the world needs, right? It needs a woman-centered social media platform because, you know, practically nothing is female-centered. After all, we live in a patriarchy, right? Anyway, let's jump into the article.
On August 12th, Spinster, a women-first social media platform, burst into the Fediverse. In its first month, Spinster faced misogynistic attacks from both the left and the right, repeated attempts to deplatform us, including removal of its Android app from the Google Play Store, and threats against the site's users. Despite this, Spinster has established itself as a place for feminist discussion, where a culture of sisterhood, sharing, and freedom has filled the gap tech giants like Twitter refuse to.
Ah, so they're getting misogynistic attacks from both the left and the right. Well, that's interesting. The question is, why would the left, which is very supportive of feminism, be attacking this particular group of feminists, with misogynistic attacks no less? Well, that's because this is a very special group of feminists. It's not your normal run-of-the-mill feminist, and we will get into that in a little bit. But just let me say that the attacks from the left are not misogynistic. The attacks are over something completely different, which we'll get to. Now, I don't know about the right. I don't know. Maybe there have been misogynistic attacks from the right. I don't know. But I know why the left are pissed off, and it's not because they hate women. Now, let me say right up front that I think these feminists, even though they are extreme man-haters, as you will see, still deserve their own space where they can, you know, talk about patriarchy and how they're all oppressed and how everything is the fault of men and how all men should be exterminated and, you know, things like that. And trust me, this group of feminists will be doing that, no doubt. But despite that, and despite that I greatly disagree with them, I still think they deserve their own space and they should be able to have their own app without it being removed. If we deplatform people simply because we find them offensive, then no one will have a platform. Okay? It doesn't matter what group you belong to, there will always be a group of people who are offended by you. Free speech is either for everyone or it's for no one. You can't have it halfway. But let's continue.
The Fediverse is a network of over 4,500 connected servers, called instances, that host social media platforms and communicate with each other through a shared data format, the ActivityPub protocol. Originally created in response to concerns about user privacy and rights on mainstream platforms like Twitter and Facebook, the Fediverse has become a place for social media refugees on both the right and left. Until now, though, these platforms have been male-dominated. Servers in the Fediverse tend to lean either right or left, and women and feminists are pushed out either way. On the left, servers like Toadon claim to be for progressives, socialists, anarchists, activists, environmentalists, vegans, anti-racists, anti-fascists, anti-capitalists, pirates, LGBTQIA+, human rights activists, etc. In other words, everyone but women and feminists.
love feminist logic. It's so fucking bizarre. So she assumes that those servers are for men, right? Even though it does not mention men in the long list of different groups. But at the same time, she assumes it's not for women because it doesn't mention women. Yeah, very consistent in her logic there. And also she says it's not for feminists, which is interesting because it's got human rights activists. Now, I would agree that feminism is not true human rights activism, but it's weird that that's coming from a feminist, right? So this is the feminist victim mentality on steroids here. Everyone's out to get them because they're women and they're feminists, and everyone hates them and the world is against them. This is really a cult mentality. But let's continue.
Toadon.nl has banned members for publishing blog posts off-site that challenge transgender ideology.
And there we have it. That is why the left is attacking this particular group of feminists. Not because they're misogynist, not because these feminists are women, not because they're feminists, but because they're radfems, because they're TERFs, because they're trans-exclusionary radical feminists. It's because the third wave feminists disagree with the second wave TERFs' anti-trans ideology. Now, the one thing that the third wavers, the intersectionalists, won't admit is the reason why these radfems hate trans women so much is because they see the trans women as men, and they fucking hate men. And they see it as an insult that, in their eyes, a man, which is a lesser being, is pretending to be a woman, which is something more perfect and without fault, because men do all the bad things in the world and women are their innocent victims, right? To use a very loose analogy, it would be like a white supremacist being pissed off that someone of a mixed background would call themselves white or Aryan. Maybe they got some Jewish blood or some black blood somewhere in the past, right? And how dare they refer to themselves as white in the eyes of the white supremacist? Well, it's a similar thing here. How dare these men, in the eyes of the radfems, refer to themselves as women? That's the issue. The whole thing can be reduced down to the hatred of men. And the third wavers are perfectly fine with the radfems hating your normal average man. That's perfectly fine. They don't see any issue with that whatsoever. But when that biological male is a trans woman, that's crossing the line.
LGBT.io, a Fediverse server specifically for LGBT plus and allies, banned a transsexual male for refusing to call himself transgender. Actor Will Wheaton was run off of Mastodon in 2018 for a series of inconsequential and vague crimes only relevant to those who use social media to test their SJW sway, after the admin of Mastodon.cloud caved to a pressure campaign.
And that's the problem with groups like this. There will always be purity tests. And as they whittle out the bad people, they will need new people to turn on. So the purity test will become more and more difficult to pass. You gotta keep, getting out those bad people and just really refine the group to the most purest SJWs possible. Essentially, they're just eating themselves. And I'm eating popcorn.
Servers like Gab.com are dominated by right-wing men, and contain misogynistic, anti-feminist, and racist content.
Okay, a couple of points. Firstly, I've never been on Gab, so I don't know if it is filled with racism and white supremacy and all the other things that, people like this claim is on there. I guess it's possible. But considering they claim that about everything, it makes me question whether they're being accurate or not. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that Gab is filled with evil white supremacists and neo-Nazis who hate blacks and Jews and women, etc., etc. There's a whole army of incels and who knows what else, right? Probably a whole bunch of orcs from Lord of the Rings as well. Why not? And all they do is sit there bitching all day about how evil Jews, blacks and women or any other minority are. Well, if you're arguing that you deserve the right to have your space to bitch about trans women and men, then surely they deserve the same right. Now, for the record, I wouldn't agree with anyone who's, bitching about blacks or Jews or women or whatever, right? Any more than I agree with someone who's bitching about trans women and men all day. But if you support the rights of one to have their space and to have free speech, then you have to support the rights of the others. And that goes for any group. It doesn't matter if you're atheist or Christian or Muslim or right-wing or left-wing or far right or far left or MRA or feminist or radfem or anti-feminist or whatever.
In far-right corners of the internet, posting about feminism can lead to anti-Semitic harassment. Server admins who attempt to find a middle ground tend to be bullied out of the job, like the admin of Don'tEatAnimals.org, who is prepared to quit after facing harassment for allowing gender-critical users to hold accounts on his server.
So by gender-critical they mean TERF, basically. Now my question is, this Spinster TERF server, right? Are they going to be banning people who are pro-trans rights? It's a simple question, but if they are, then they're being a little bit hypocritical. You can't criticize other groups for banning anti-trans rhetoric if you're banning pro-trans rhetoric in your space. Either both spaces should be allowed to ban who they want, or it should be open to everyone. Take your pick.
Like in most other tech spaces, women have been pushed out of the Fediverse by a male-dominated culture.
Yeah, this is funny because the same people that push TERFs off platforms like Twitter are the same ones that push male anti-feminists off and use women's safety as the argument, which is the exact same argument that the TERFs use. They see the fact that they're being silenced as an attack on women, and it's not really. It's an attack on ideology. The people attacking them are feminists, many of which who are female, who are not attacking their fellow feminists because they hate women. They're doing it because they have a different ideology. Well, that is the part of their ideology that concerns trans women. The rest of their ideology, they pretty much agree on. All the stuff about toxic masculinity and patriarchy and all the rest of it, yeah, pretty much agree on all that, but it's just the trans women issue that they have a problem with. So I find it laughable that the author of this piece is claiming that it's because the internet is a male-dominated space that the poor TERFs are being excluded simply because they're women. No, it's not. It's your fellow women doing it to you because they disagree with your stance on trans people. That's simple. But I don't think the radfems can conceive of a world where women are the bad guys or women are doing something wrong in their eyes. It always has to be somehow the fault of men.
It's no surprise that women are hard to find in the Fediverse, except on sex work servers, which are dedicated to the buying and selling of sexual services.
And of course they're sex negative feminists as well. Gee, I didn't see that one coming. That was a shock. My personal opinion on sex work or pornography or whatever is that consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want with their own body. And if that means selling it, then that's their choice. As long as they're not forced into it, then they should be able to do what they want with their own body. And they have to deal with the consequences of that, be they negative or positive or whatever. But that's really off topic. I'm not going to read you any more of the article because it's pretty much the same. It's just TERFs complaining that they're being attacked by the left and the right because they're women, which clearly is not the case at all. If you want to read the rest of the article, as always, the link is down in the description. But, if they want their space, that's fine, in my opinion. I mean, I think there's only 6,000 of them anyway, so it's not like there's a lot of them. But I do want to have a little quick rant about social media on the internet. I personally think there are two types of social media on the internet, and I will refer to them as specified and general. Now, what the radfems are talking about here is specified. In other words, it is a space for a particular group to talk about particular topics. And I'm perfectly fine with this. I think there should be specified spaces for particular groups to discuss whatever they want, be it feminism or atheism or religion or politics or whatever. You know, fucking which is the best Transformers movie, which is insane because, you know, they're all pretty crap. But if people want to form a group and do that, I don't have a problem with that. And if they want to ban people who don't fit into the group, that's fine too. Although I think the rules should be pretty fucking clear before someone joins. And if you don't like the particular rules of a particular group, then you can go make your own group, right? And there are advantages to this. If you get a group of people together discussing particular issues, then they can work together and network to fix those issues. Although I don't think Spinster is going to be solving a lot of the world's issues. But, you know, beside the point, right? There is a downside to this too, though. And the downside is echo chambers. If you have a group of people together who all think the same way, and they exclude people who think differently, and their ideas aren't challenged, and there isn't alternative information introduced into the group at any point, then you create echo chambers. And echo chambers create extremists, because all they see is a particular worldview. It's like I've heard from feminists before who have worked at domestic abuse shelters, 20 or 30 years, and they talk about how violent men are to women. Yeah, because they're seeing female victims who have been assaulted by violent men. That's all they see. They don't see the flip side of that. They don't see the male victims who have been assaulted by females. So that just isn't in their worldview. So echo chambers are very bad. And echo chambers can definitely result from what I'm referring to as specified social media groups. And that's why I think we need general social media groups, or generalized social media groups as well. Things like Twitter and Facebook, although they're not working the way they should be. Now, what I mean by generalized is the platform doesn't cater to a particular group, but they're open to all groups. It doesn't matter what religion you are, or what politics you believe in, or, which Transformers movie you think is the best one, or whatever, right? Flat earthers, fucking Scientologists, atheists, you name it, anyone can go there. Now, I'm not saying that these spaces shouldn't be without some rules. Obviously, if someone is posting child porn or whatever, they should be banned. Or, maybe if they're making death threats or posting people's private information. There are some limits, obviously. But people shouldn't be banned from these spaces because they have unpopular opinions. Be it anti-feminism, or be it trans-exclusionary radical feminism, or be it a particular religious belief or political belief or whatever. I wouldn't even ban fans of the Transformers movies, even though I think they're insane. So the generalized social media platform should be for everyone, where people can have a discourse, where they can talk to people with different ideas and different information, and they can have discussions, and it doesn't turn into an echo chamber. Unfortunately, this doesn't really work that well in practice, not only because special interest groups tend to try to get people they disagree with banned, but also because people just tend to resort to abuse. In particular on Twitter, it's difficult to have a good conversation with a feminist. I've had a few, but most of them, they'll just start throwing insults at you or block you. But echo chambers definitely don't help that attitude. And I think it's unfortunate that we're devolving into a society where we're broken off into little groups, where we don't communicate with other people who have different opinions. And I think that's making people more extreme. And I think that's very unfortunate. I think we've lost a lot because of that. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Now, I did come across another article which I wanted to go through quickly after my end credits. I only want to point out a couple of things in it, so it won't be very long. It wasn't really worth doing another video on it because it's going to be that short. But it does concern TERFs, trans people, and MRAs. Well, not actually MRAs, although we are brought up. Okay, just to finish off the video, I want to have a quick look at an article which is called Graham Linehan is seriously unhappy that Ruth Hunt has been appointed to the House of Lords. Now, if you don't know who any of these people are, it doesn't really matter. You'll pick up the gist of it as we go on. Just before we have a quick look at this, though, this headline has actually been changed because I've still got it open on my iPad, and the former headline was Anti-trans Graham Linehan is mad that trans ally Ruth Hunt is joining the House of Lords. So I'm not exactly sure why they've changed it, but they have. So anyway, apparently Linehan is a Irish comedian that used to write Father Ted or something like that, right? And apparently he's a TERF. He hates trans women. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because of this part. Linehan, who has more than 650,000 followers on Twitter, tweeted, "Is Ruth Hunt the first MRA peer?" Yeah, now as I've pointed out in previous videos, the third wave feminists like to refer to anyone who's anti-trans as an MRA, while the second wave TERFs like to refer to anyone who is pro-trans rights as an MRA, and that's what we're seeing here. He's referring to someone who's pro-trans rights as an MRA because in his mind all pro-trans rights people are men's rights activists somehow. I'm not exactly sure how that works. It's, you know, the weird logic of the TERFs, right? It's basically anyone I dislike is an MRA. That's the logic that just about all feminists use. And the article criticizes him for comparing a pro-trans rights lesbian feminist with the evil MRAs. How dare you refer to someone who's clearly not an MRA as an MRA? What kind of lunatic would do that, right? Well, the writer of this article is the type of lunatic who would do that. Because this very article says, the men's rights activist MRA movement is anti-feminist. It's not the men's rights activist movement, it's the men's rights movement, the MRM. You can't even get that right. And the link, by the way, is to a generic all anti-feminists hate women article that I think they're publishing 10 of those a day at the moment. But it goes on to say, Elliot Rodger, one of the most infamous MRAs, killed 6 people and injured 14 others in 2014 before killing himself. After ranting on YouTube about the injustice of women not being attracted to him. Rogers, it's Roger, by the way, not Rogers. Rogers also had links to violently misogynistic groups. Yeah, and it links to a New York Post article which says the smoking gun that Elliot Rodger was an MRA was that he was subscribed to YouTube channels of men's rights activists, which unfortunately for them, he wasn't. But, why be concerned about the truth, right? I mean, this lie's only been going around for 5 years now, so might as well just refer to it as fact from now on, right? So apparently it's wrong, it's blasphemy to refer to a pro-trans rights person as an MRA, but it's perfectly okay to falsely accuse a serial killer of being an MRA because that suits the purpose of this particular author, right? Who gives a fuck about facts?